Welcome back to the deep. Beneath the waves lies a world stranger than fiction. Life began in the water, and the ocean had deep time to dream up creatures no land could ever make. In the last video, the sea pen that etched a question mark into the seabed caught your eye. So, here are more ocean oddities. Some I know, some I think I know, and some, well, I'm counting on you. Like these holes. Perfect, eerie, or strange seabed shapes, like crop circles drawn by something that doesn't farm. Not to mention the cast of nature's most peculiar animals. As weird as they are, every one of them belongs to the same planet we call home. By the way, some people think that these creatures are so bizarre that they must be AI generated. In a way, it's a compliment to how outlandish they seem. I assure you they're all real. Many of them were drawn by Victorian artists 150 years before the invention of AI, for a start. But at the end, I'll show some examples of what AI makes of recreating marine animals. And you can decide for yourself. By the way, here's a new logo to identify AI whenever it's on screen. Designed by AI, of course. I'm John Ruthven. I've been filming the ocean for about 30 years, and I've written a book about filming at sea called The Whale in the Living Room, about my experiences on filming the BBC's Blue Planet and many other ocean films. And the weird stuff? It's out there. Let's take a look. These glowing blue creatures from Indonesia shimmer like alien jelly beans, but their light isn't bioluminescence. It's just flashlight bouncing through their jelly-like bodies, refracted like natural fibre optics. Inside there's a delicate basket, a built-in colander that filters plankton and slots right inside the translucent sac called the tunic. That's when you realise you're looking at a sea squirt, or as scientists like to call them, tunicates. What's more, the sac is made of cellulose. It's a material normally reserved for plants, and very unusual in animals. And sea squirts are definitely animals. Juveniles are mobile and even have a simple type of backbone. Head to the Atlantic and you'll find a potato-shaped species, with a long stalk that lifts its siphons above the seabed, keeping its breathing and feeding parts clear of the muck. But in the very deep, that's when things get weirder again. Megalodicopia hyans, the big-mouthed sea squirt, is found worldwide from the Monterey Canyon to polar waters, and it doesn't bother with filtering at all. Instead, it waits with its mouth-like siphon wide open, and when a shrimp or zooplankton drifts in, muscles around the rim slam shut. It's a carnivore. It's got no trigger hairs, it's just a reflex, the shutting of the mouth. But that trap stays closed for days, while the prey is slowly digested. So as gentle as you might think sea squirts are, this one's a predatory meat eater, feeding on larger animals than its surface cousins. In the cold North Atlantic, something waits in the shadows, long-bodied, low-slung, and with a head like a battering ram. It doesn't float, it doesn't chase, it sinks to the bottom and stays there until it strikes. This is the Atlantic wolffish, a predator that lives on the sea floor from the coasts of the United Kingdom and Scandinavia to North America. It hides in rocky crevices at depths of about 20 to 500 metres, that's down to 1,500 feet, ambushing crabs, sea urchins and shellfish. Its skull is a marvel of brute force, broad, reinforced, menacing, and packed with crushing molars that rival a hyena's for bite force. Off California, a close relative is known as the wolf eel. Right, now stop it. I know what you're thinking. It's not an eel. And beauty is in the eye of the beholder. They drift across the abyss like pink balloons with legs, soft, slow, and oddly endearing. These are sea pigs, and a kind of sea cucumber, in the same group as starfish. Herding across the seafloor, they crawl with stubby tube feet, scooping up detritus with feathery tentacles. Some inflate or deflate to shift direction or avoid danger, and in certain regions they can blanket the sediment like a living tide, feasting wherever organic debris falls, garbage collecting and recycling it back into this wonderful, if bizarre, ecosystem. Many see-through creatures look like fireworks. When lit by the lights of a submarine or sometimes by their own glow, they burst into colour, and the light reveals the strangeness of their biology. Jellyfish especially. Radial canals, tubes that circulate nutrients, tentacles trailing, glowing lobes, all catch the light and scatter it like sparks. What I'm talking about is called structural colour. Obviously they've got pigments too, and some jellyfish are almost opaque. And it's not bioluminescence either. Their internal structures can trap light and bounce it around. If the angle is steep enough, light reflects instead of escaping, a trick called total internal reflection. It's the same principle as fibre optics. Light enters, hits the boundary, the edge, the inside, and travels along and inside the structure. And that's why some parts flare up, while others stay invisible. Many species show this, each one a slow-motion spark in the dark. And then there's the jellyfish that started it all, the first one to be dubbed a firework jelly. Halitraphis massae. But many medusa don't just reflect light, they make their own. This one, likely of the Chrysoto genus, glowing red and green in the abyss. It's not a reflection, it's a detonation. And again, there's many species of bioluminescent jellyfish. And finally, comb jellies, ctenophores, deserve their own kind of spotlight. Their shimmering rainbows come not from chemistry, but from refraction, when light is bent by the different materials it passes through. In this case, from water into their tiny hairs called cilia, which are almost transparent. Even when still they bend light, but when they beat, they scatter it like a moving prism. Smaller fireworks, but no less brilliant. Of course, there's rarely any human light down here, but even faint natural light from bioluminescent neighbours might still be enough to trigger the effect. And in the deep that might be useful to confuse predators, to signal other jellyfish, or simply to shock in a world of shadows. They look like underwater ferns, delicate and feathery, but again they're animals dressed as plants. Most have 5 arms, each lined with fine filaments that trap plankton drifting past. When anchored to the seabed, those species are called sea lilies. Others break free and are good swimmers, and they're known as feather stars, or crinoids, to give them their posh name. Maybe it's crinoids. Although it looks more complicated, their legs have a 5-based symmetry, which is a giveaway. Crinoids are close relatives of starfish. But you say it's got more than 5 legs. Well, actually, it can have 5, 10, 15, 20, 200 legs, as long as they're divisible by 5. It's called pentaradial symmetry, and is the characteristic of the echinoderms, sea urchins, starfish, brittle stars, and feather stars. Not forgetting their friends, the sea cucumbers. In the depths and in shallow water too, they often perch on rocks or corals, arms outstretched like living antennae, tuned into the current. But feather stars can be surprisingly fast, and I love their flapping, swimming style. In the cold dark of the deep sea, a king crab moves slowly across the seabed. But look closer. Resting on its back, a snailfish. Soft-bodied, with flabby soft bones adapted to the deep sea, and quietly opportunistic. It's not just catching a ride. Some snailfish lay their eggs inside the crab's gill cavity, which is an oxygen-rich chamber meant for breathing, but now repurposed by the small fish for brooding. The female has 2 ovipositors, those 2 funny little tentacles on the front, which she pushes into the shell of the crab to lay her eggs. And there the eggs stay safe, ventilated by the crab's own movements. But to the crab, there's a real cost. Its growth slows, can't breathe as efficiently, and it's thought some crabs will die early. So it's not a partnership. It's not symbiosis. It's parasitism. Horrific, but elegant, quiet, and deeply invasive. A reminder that in the deep, survival isn't always a battle. Sometimes it's about cunning, even going to the lengths of hijacking another creature's life.
They're pretty big.
Thank you. Yeah, pretty big.
Evenly spaced, perfectly aligned. Clusters of mysterious holes. And they're nearly 3,000 feet down.
Especially there's nothing else around, which is so surprising.
That's really weird.
And if they're holes that big, must be pretty deep between the boulders.
But whatever's making them, it isn't at home. Scientists are puzzled. Maybe it's a large polychaete worm. Another candidate might be this giant woodlouse animal, Bathynomus giganteus, the giant isopod. And it obviously does burrow into soft sediments. But really, at a dinner plate size, it's too big, and the laser marker of those holes show them to be about 4 inches in diameter, only half as much as the width of this beast. So more likely, it's a smaller type of crustacean, something that looks like a little lobster. Things like large mud shrimp do indeed make burrows like this, with very deep and complicated chambers below, but they're from shallower depths. But without any sign of the architect, or DNA evidence, your guess is as good, or probably better, than mine. Why not tell me below? And there's plenty more mysterious marks and circles down on the seabed, as you might imagine. Like this. Until there was some more sophisticated research, these crop marks on the seabed were a conspiracy theorist's dream. But using time-lapse recording, such as that done by the Monterey Bay Research Institute, their secrets were revealed. They're made by acorn worms, a sediment-feeding worm that leaves spiral trails of sifted mud as it turns. When it's had its fill, it can even float away to another site. It looks like a cage or a basket, delicate, symmetrical, almost too precise to have been made by a living creature. But it was. This is a glass sponge. Its skeleton is built from fused silica spicules, forming intricate latticework. It is indeed a glass-like substance, as you can see more clearly in this filamentous species. In all the different kinds, it's made from silicon oxide, which it extracts from seawater very slowly over time and crystallizes, making a better form of glass than we do. And of course at cold temperatures too. It doesn't need a furnace. Instead of being brittle, it's flexible and tough, just what's needed to protect itself from predators in the sea.
I'm loving my sponges.
Glass sponges grow very slowly, and they get very old. These are volcano glass sponges, 2 meters 6 feet tall, from Antarctica, and at 15,000 years are thought to be the oldest living organism on Earth. Within the species of glass sponge, called the Venus flower basket, there is an unsettling secret. Not only do shrimp and the like settle on the outside of the glass sponges, they've found a safe place to hide inside. But more than that, they've been caged up for a life sentence. coming into the lattice of the glass sponge as a small shrimp, they become too big to ever escape. Trapped inside a protective but claustrophobic labyrinth of glass. Uh-oh, here comes something I'm going to have trouble identifying. Looks a bit like a mackerel, but it's not. It's too deep. It could be a deep sea smolt, but I think that big jaw gives it away. It's got a characteristic dark bit at the end of the chin too. It's likely a hammer jaw. They often hang vertically to give themselves a lower profile and look upwards with their big eyes for lanternfish and even tuna, which they can attack. They've got enormous teeth, and it's thought when they want to, they can move at really high speed. It looks like a pale, stretchy worm, soft-bodied, smooth, and faintly ringed, like something you'd expect to find in garden soil.
Ribbon worms.
There we go. Perfect.
But this one's deep sea and far more advanced than it seems. As the scientists said, it's a ribbon worm, part of a group called the nematodes. Sounds like a 60s pop band. They're not well known, but they're quietly impressive. Hidden inside is a long, muscular proboscis, a kind of built-in harpoon that shoots out to grab prey, and they've got plenty of toxin, or paralytics, to subdue their catch. The polychaete worm on the right, which is attacked, soon stops moving. The venom has taken effect. All that remains now is to be swallowed whole. What you see might only be part of it. These worms often burrow into soft sediment with much of their body hidden beneath the surface, waiting, sensing, ready to strike. It's something you left in the deep freeze, pale, soft-bodied and quietly feeding on a substance that could power cities. These are methane ice worms, scale worms that live directly on methane hydrate outcrops, crystalline structures where methane gas is trapped inside frozen water in the deep sea. Found thousands of feet down, these hydrates form under high pressure and low temperature, often near what's called cold seeps. They look like dirty ice, but if you brought them to the surface, they'd be flammable, and they're unstable, as well as being biologically rich. These worms have the scientific name of Cerasomethanicola, which sounds like a mixture between methane and Coca-Cola. But whatever they're called, they've adapted to this surreal habitat.
Cerasomethanicola.
What's that?
Ice worms. How long have they been here?
They're not actually grazing on the methane itself, but on microbes that grow on the hydrate surface, bacteria that themselves feed on methane. Their bodies are soft, scale-covered, and built for digging into this frozen fuel. It's a paradox, life thriving on something that shouldn't support it, a sorbet of methane, hosting worms that shimmer, crawl, and quietly rewrite the rules of survival. Right, well, as you know by now, I could go on for a long time about deep-sea creatures, but I really don't want to drone on more than about 17 minutes as it's been already. And of course, there's many more deep-sea creature videos to do. I didn't tell you what this is, a giant hydroid, very strange, half coral, half jellyfish, with no brain, and yet it has a coordinated attack system. Or various types of esoteric anemones. And stranger types still of sea cucumbers that are on the seabed and have got an amazing swimming behaviour too. That's for next time. And you'll know too that these animals aren't monsters or myths, they're real creatures sharing our planet. They thrive in darkness, pressure, low oxygen, cold temperatures and scarcity, adapting in ways we barely understand. Some are ancient survivors, many are newly discovered, and all are part of Earth's story. The deep sea may be lonely, but it isn't empty. As a whole, it's full of life, mystery, and quiet brilliance. And the more we look, the more we realise the weird isn't rare. It's everywhere. Well, I promised you a bit of experimentation with AI just to prove, for those that still don't believe, that all the images I show you of deep sea creatures are real. So there's a couple of ways you can do this. I've used a program called Halio AI, and most of them make just about 6 to 10 seconds of video at any one time. So you can start with a prompt, as I'm sure you know, just describing what you want to see, or you can use a picture, and if you use a real picture, then of course you're half in the real world already, although you might animate it into something that perhaps doesn't exist. So to give you specific examples of the real animals that I've shown in this video already, let's try and recreate that glowing blue sea squirt that you saw at the top. First of all, I've used a prompt, and this is what I've written. A fluorescent sea squirt deep underwater with particles in the water that it filters. The body is translucent and you can see some of its pharyngeal basket through the skin. That's the technical name for the basket that's inside sea squirts or tunicates. And this is what it produced. Interesting, but nothing like the original. So what I did was to take the picture as the start point, the seed if you like, for the 6-second animation. And this is the prompt I also gave with it. Slight water current from left to right with sparse, tiny dust-like particles. Slight movement of sea squirts. It's got the colour great because it had the original photograph to compare, but it's making the tops of those sea squirts flap like anything. And I could improve it because I could say things like, don't move so fast, and then it would slow it down and perhaps just look like it's oscillating in the current. That's quite a lot of fiddle. Each one of these, even though I've got a subscription, takes maybe 10 minutes. To refine this, I think about half an hour, just for 6 seconds. So if I was to make a video like this, and I wouldn't because I would always tell you if I was using AI, then I estimate instead of taking the usual 2 weeks or so, it would take me about 3 months. So I just wouldn't even bother with the AI that's currently available to me. I mean, it's going to get better, and there are issues, of course, of authenticity and trust, and that's what it boils down to in the end. Trust that the source that you're looking at is going to be honest. In this case, Induna, with its starfish brand. And that's going to become more and more valuable in the future. And of course, although this is a very useful tool for individual producers like me, when you want to illustrate something, I will always try and mention that it's not something completely real. Perhaps in the future there'll be some new standards where information is embedded in the data and shown on screen. But we're in a point of development at the moment, and this is all yet to come. And by the way, it'd be almost impossible for me to fund any of this deep sea footage. To say the least, you could probably cost it at about $50,000 a day, if it wasn't for the philanthropic organisations which made their footage public domain. Anyway, we're working in a very different era than when I started at the BBC about 40 years ago. It's still an interesting debate, and tell me what you think in the comments below. In any case, as I say, some of these creatures have been in zoology textbooks 50 years before the invention of AI. In fact, some Victorian zoologists, Ernst Haeckel comes to mind, were drawing things like these marine worms or nudibranchs, naked snails, 150 years ago. And this is a basket star, which is that crinkly-armed animal related to starfish that I showed you earlier. And this appeared in Art Forms in Nature by Ernst Haeckel, 1904. AI is here to stay, and it's another tool in the toolbox. And like all such things, it can be used both for good or bad. It could be a very useful technique if you were doing something out of fantasy, like trying to recreate the oceans of Europa, Jupiter's moon, which has got a lot of water on it, and speculate about what life might be there. But a lot of good organisations like NOAA, MBARI, and the Schmidt Ocean Institute in the United States are doing some great remote vehicle work in the deep sea, and their images are just spectacular.